I was wandering around in the woods one day. After an hour of walking around, I hadn't thought of pain. I thought, that's something special. I need to explore that. The objective of the photography wasn't to gain a huge following and financial success. The objective of the photography was to...
I saw a quote of yours: there's much more to happiness in photography than just a great photograph.
There's so much pressure these days, isn't there, to produce, to create content. If I get the process right, the photographs will come.
Tell us the insider knowledge of how you successfully create a sustainable business model around this type of photography.
It's not easy.
Welcome to the Mood Podcast, uncovering the art of conversation through the lens of photography and creativity, one frame at a time. I'm your host, Matt Jacob. Thank you so much for joining me in today's conversation. And today I'm speaking with Simon Baxter, a woodland photographer from North Yorkshire in England, whose intimate connection with nature and solitude has made him one of the most respected voices in the outdoor photography community. Known for his deeply personal approach to capturing quiet, overlooked corners of the natural world, Simon's work is a meditation on patience, presence, and emotional resonance. In this episode, we talked about how chronic illness shaped his path into woodland photography, how solitude fuels creativity, and what it means to build a relationship with a single place over years. We explore the ethical tension of sharing sacred spaces, the emotional power of stillness, and whether art can truly shift how people engage with nature. It's really a grounded and reflective conversation, one that might just inspire you to slow down, go for a walk, and look a little closer at the beauty hiding in plain sight. So now I bring you Simon Baxter. Simon Baxter, welcome to the Mood Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's really great to have you here. Of course, I'm very excited to jump into your unique and beautiful photography and work, as well as all of the stories behind it, and your philosophies and your wheres and hows behind your process and output. But, I wanted to go through the conversation as chronologically as possible, as best we can in terms of your pedigree and your history and all the way up to present day. But actually, to start, I wanted to go a little bit deeper into something that might be relevant to your secret ingredient, certainly the philosophy or the unique philosophy that you take through photography. So if you did have a secret ingredient that made you be able to do what you do, even through all the tough times and all the good times as well, what do you think that would be necessarily?
Secret ingredient. Wow. When I think back to pivotal moments in my photography, when you have that bit of epiphany where there's something that's always been there, but there becomes a moment when you actually become consciously aware of it. And I think one of the most important moments for me, which I do see as a secret ingredient, because it's something that you can't teach people. It's something very difficult to articulate, and that's an emotional connection to what you photograph. And I remember the specific moment when this happened, and you kind of know that you become emotionally charged when you're photographing something that you love, and there is a genuine connection there. But trying to understand it or recognize how it influences your photography is really quite difficult. But there was a moment when I was out one day and I was sort of struggling with sort of back issues, which was resulting in mental health issues. And I was photographing a particular tree, and it suddenly hit me like, oh my God, I've just realized that I'm photographing things which feel like a reflection of how I'm feeling, somber scenes, moody trees, struggling trees, trees reaching out into open space, just looking for something. And when I realized that, I wasn't just photographing nice looking trees, there was something, more, deeper here. There was deeper connection. I was just overcome with emotion. which I never expected. You know, my partner would say that I'm not an emotional person, but I know that I very much am in a lot of ways. Um, and yeah, that was really quite a profound moment, and that's something that I've run with since, is the importance of being emotionally connected with the things that you love to photograph.
So where has that emotional connection come from? You mentioned a little bit there about injuries and being in chronic pain. Tell us a little bit about that backstory.
Yeah, so prior to becoming a woodland photographer, I was a website developer, so I spent a lot of time sat at a desk. And when I was a website developer, my hobbies were very much fueled by adrenaline. So I was a keen mountain biker, snowboarding, hiking, that kind of thing, kayaking and all sorts of stuff. But then I never had any particular warning signs that my back was struggling, and I just hit a tipping point, and it just went kind of pop one day. Ended up with a ruptured disc, ended up with all sorts of weird nerve pains, terrible kind of joint and muscular pain. And it sort of sent me into a bit of a downward spiral, really, because it was the early stages that were most difficult, because you're thinking, oh, it's been 2 weeks that I've not ridden my bike, whereas now it's been 13 years, and as time goes on, that it becomes easier and you become more accepting of pain. But I spent the first kind of couple of years really struggling with it, and then my partner recognized that I needed something, I needed some help, and we ended up getting a dog, which became a surprise because my partner is allergic to most dogs. But she found out that a friend
Really?
was having my friend was having a one-off litter of Labradoodles, and she said, "I've heard they're hypoallergenic, so let's go and have a look, and I'll
Right.
see how we
Yeah.
we get on." So yeah, then we got Meg, and she became a positive distraction because I was at home alone every day, trying to make websites, but business was suffering because I couldn't spend the time at a desk. So she became a positive distraction. I started to take Meg out on what is very odd. Karen, our lives are in tandem, because if you've got a puppy, you have to kind of slowly introduce them to the world. You have a 15-minute walk, and then over a period of months, you build it up to 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and so on. And I was kind of going at the same pace as Meg. It's like, oh, well, I've walked 15 minutes and that's enough for me. Um, and then once she got to a year old, I was ready to walk further. And then I started to photograph Meg in the woods. Then I would photograph her in the open landscape. Then I would turn my camera to only the open landscape. And then I realized that from a pain perspective, it just wasn't enough, because if I was stood there waiting for the golden light to arrive, I'd be stood there thinking about pain. So I
Mm.
decided to kind of get back into the woods, which is kind of where my roots are, really, as a mountain biker. But I just approached it at a much slower pace. And then I was wandering around in the woods one day in an unfamiliar woodland, and felt completely different. There was something very special about that environment. And I realized that after an hour of walking around, I hadn't thought of pain in that past hour, which was the first time for an hour in 3 years. And I thought, that's something special. I need to explore that and repeat it as often as I possibly can. And that's where I fell in love with woodland photography.
Wow. Distraction then, or more therapy, or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you try to distract yourself, it doesn't work, does it? Whereas this felt like a genuine distraction. But I mean, distraction doesn't really do it justice. It is because you become immersed in your surroundings. So, yeah, so the therapeutic benefits of being immersed in nature, I mean, they're well documented now. In Japan, they
Mm.
have Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, which wasn't something that I was aware of at the time. It's just something I've been introduced to since, having already benefited from that green prescription, if you like. And yeah, I mean, it's like a drug, isn't it? You realize it's doing you good, and every time you go out, you feel that little bit better, and you get this cumulative effect of spending time in nature with your best friend, and then photography just became a celebration of that, I guess.
Green prescription. I love that.
Yeah,
That's very 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 cool. Yeah,
yeah,
have a dose of greenery. That'll do you some good. And I think maybe not distraction, but maybe like a flow state as well. Add in photography as well as the green prescription, and then you've got a recipe for something extremely powerful and healing, essentially.
yeah, exactly. Because it's there's a constant shift in stimulus in the woods. There's nowhere, I can't think of anywhere else that's as complex
Mm.
and changes as much with the seasons as being in the woods. You get constant changes in color, texture, light, smells, wildlife. It all changes with the seasons and it changes with every single visit. And that's the thing. There's so much to take in that it's like the pain gate. If your arm's hurting, but then somebody hits you on the thumb with a hammer, your arm no longer hurts. You're just thinking about your thumb, and it's a bit like that. There's no room for anything else because you're so consumed with trying to make sense of everything that's going on around you. So the creative process of photography, it's encouraged you to slow down and be observant and to observe the woods and take it all in a way that visually makes sense and becomes cohesive. It takes time and it takes a lot of attention, and you can maybe hear Meg
That's
barking in the
Meg.
background right
Yeah.
now.
Go on, Meg, let it all out.
Yeah.
I know that sound. We have 4 dogs at home, and yeah, I definitely have a favorite, and she's the quietest one. So it says a lot about the other three. And so, is that creative process? Is that something? Is that where you really derive the happiness? 'Cause I saw a quote of yours, and I wrote it down here. There's much more to happiness in photography than just a great photograph. So, can you explain that a little bit and dissect that for us?
Yeah, I guess that's my second secret ingredient is um is this there's so much pressure these days, isn't there, to produce, to create content, to put a photograph out there onto social media. And I'm sure you've had lots of guests that have, talked about the pressures of social media. We're all completely aware of it. But even though we're aware of the problems of that pressure, I think most people still give in to that. Because they've got a business to run, they feel as if they have to feed the algorithms. But that's something that I've genuinely managed quite well, I think. I do enough to sustain a business, but I definitely don't play to the algorithms. I don't put stuff out there for the sake of, publishing a photograph. And the reason for that is because I just don't put pressure on me to produce, you have this expected output, don't we, which is a photograph. But the creative process is about so much more than the end result. And that's where I like to focus on because I know if I get that right, if I get the process right, the photographs will come when they're good
Mm.
and ready. But if I'm constantly putting pressure on myself to go out and actually make images, it doesn't allow me any kind of breathing room. It doesn't allow me the space to go out and actually try something new, to actually just enjoy the woods for what it is and everything that it has to offer. And I need that space. I need it to feel like a hobby because as soon as I'm, out there every day because I feel as if I have to make a video, then it becomes very much a business. But I like to think that the one of the best qualities about producing a photograph is that it has a piece of you in it. It's got some soul. It's something very personal. It's not just serving a purpose for a business. And I think I for it to have soul, I have to feel it, and I have to understand the place, and I have to feel good about being there. And that's only going to happen if I'm going out and actually just enjoying it without a camera as well. And that's always the best place. That's always the best starting point. If you can go to somewhere and feel completely content and happy without a camera in your hand and love exploring that space without, any self-imposed pressure to make a photograph, then that's the best possible place to be creative. So, yeah, I mean, I think hand in hand in that actually is actually depriving yourself of the things that you love sometimes. So I've not been out with my camera for a good few weeks now because I've been busy with so many other things at home. But that's a good thing. That's healthy because it means that when I get back into the woods, it's like, oh, I'm so happy to be back. And then that rush of positivity and relief, even if it doesn't turn into a photograph on that particular day, the chances are on that visit, I'm going to be seeing things differently. I'm going to be having a fresh, positive outlook. And that's the bit that I value the most because I know that the photographs will come. And it's having that, I think you need the experience to have confidence in the process, trust in the process, and be completely happy if you don't make a photograph. But it takes experience to have the confidence to know that they'll come when they're good and ready.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to get across, especially to people who are just starting in the photography space. I think there's so much pressure to. I was speaking with a relative beginner earlier today, and they were just so caught up in every other photographer on Instagram, basically, and they were getting
Mm,
completely distracted on style and genre and technique, and completely forgetting about really where the voice comes from and how to, I guess, impart meaning in your work. And if that's really important to them, if that's well, it kind of has to be if you want to take photography seriously.
mm.
So tell me a little bit about, you touched upon why the woodland and that environment means so much to you, but really where did this all come from? But more importantly, why, how do you find those areas and those locations and a specific tree or a specific set of trees and woods that actually mean something to you, mean something enough to get your camera out and take a photo?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because what the places that actually mean something to me photographically, it's shifted and it's evolved with time, and I can definitely see that now. And it's just another one of these things which you don't realize it until you do, and then when you do, it just completely transforms the way that you move forward. So obviously, it all started out, and the start of it obviously was going out with Megan and finding the therapeutic power and restorative power of the woods, and that's what got me kind of addicted to it. But then with time, the things that have influenced is actually my direction is actually understanding what you're photographing. And whether that be, some ecological knowledge of what you're photographing, knowledge of all the different species of trees, a little bit about what's growing in the understory, what happens with particular trees through the seasons. And then that all helps with the connection because it's very difficult to be emotionally connected with something if you don't understand it. Understanding and knowledge has to come first. And then as a result of that knowledge and understanding, you start to care. That whole process got me to, in love with oak trees, because they're so ecologically significant. One of our most valuable trees in the UK. So then that kind of changed my view of things. It's not just a tree which looks fantastic. There's a whole lot of value in this, and it's something that should be revered. But then as time's gone on, I've started to find locations which several years ago I wouldn't have tried to photograph because they were just too difficult. But going back
Mm,
to what I was saying before, I photograph them now precisely because they're difficult. They're incredibly complex. It's a challenge to make sense of them, but I love being there. So yes, it's going to take me longer to make good images. But the fact is that whether I'm making a photograph or not, as long as I love being there, then that's the most important thing. But these locations that I'm photographing, some of them are private woodlands. A lot of them,
okay.
have open access. And it's literally just been a case of I look on some satellite images I look at ordnance survey maps. I kind of figure out where something might be, with no prior knowledge as to, has any other photographer been there? If
Mm.
if I can't find any photographic evidence of a woodland, then that's exciting to me, because I want to find places where nobody else is going. Ideally where you don't even get people walking through, because then it just feels like your own little sanctuary, and that's a bit of a privilege, to be honest, if you can find that. And I've been fortunate enough to find places which are privately owned, and I've been allowed access to go and photograph them as I please. But yeah, it's just a case of going for a walk after looking on mapping software and see what I find. Sometimes you don't find anything, and other times you're just blown away with what's been tucked away in a quiet corner of the North York moors, and then it's somewhere you could get years and years worth of work. Um, Interestingly, though, I get lots of people asking me for, where I've taken a particular photograph, and they'll say to me, I don't have time. I work full time. I've got a family. I do not have time to go and scout out locations like you do. I want to be told where places are. And I just have very, very strong beliefs on that. And I think, well, what you're actually saying is you want to be productive when you go out. You want to make images. You do have time. If you've got time to go out with the camera, you've got time to go and scout. You just might not result on anything that particular day. And it comes back to the process. And I think if I think of what gives me the most satisfaction from start to finish, I like this common thread of I've found a location, I've found compositions and the location, I've worked it, I've tuned into the rhythms of that place, I've got to know it, I've tried day in, day out over the course of years, and then ultimately I get an image which represents that place and says everything that I want it, which speaks for that location and the trees that live there, and I've printed it and it's on the wall. And if I don't have one of those things, then that's okay. But one of the most important things is that it's somewhere that I found, and it feels as if not that it belongs to me, but that I belong to the woods, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it sounds there's a lot going on there, and I really resonate with your, I guess, disagreement with those sentiments, which are, prevalent in most kind of hobbyists when it comes to photography. Certainly those that are on social media and they think they just want to go out and get a nice shot, come home. They're just kind of missing the point. And first of all, they get a shot that looks like everyone else's. Second of all, it just means nothing. It's just a way for you to kind of either show off or maybe get some likes, or I don't know. It seems a bit vacuous. But people say I'm pretentious because I say things like that. But I don't know. I think there's more to, there's going to be my kind of the final thing I was going to add on top of that, or ask you on top of that, was once you found this location and it feels good to you aesthetically, then how do you kind of resonate with that specific location internally and kind of think, okay, this feels good to me. This feels like something I can, get something out of metaphorically or in a meaningful sense.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch briefly on what you said about, being accused of being pretentious, with that viewpoint. I think what it is that what you've experienced, what you feel is one of those magic ingredients. And it's not that you're preaching that, it's that actually, no, this is one of the most valuable parts of the experience, and that's what you're trying to share with people. It's not pretentious at all, right? And if anything, we're saying to people, no, this is brilliant. You need to go out and experience this yourself. Trust me on this. There's nothing
It's
better
difficult
than
to translate that, though, isn't it? Until you've actually experienced it. I tell people all the time, if I think back in my history of photography and all of my favorite images, the favorite part is not the image, it's the experience behind that image. I always think about the trip or the location or the people, most importantly, that have helped me get that image, that I've spent time with at the same time as getting that image. The image is always like the final 5%.
Yeah,
and it's difficult to make people understand that, right?
Yes.
Because it's such a visual medium, they see that as the one and only thing that matters.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And which kind of leads into, your other question about, how you find the meaning in a place, and, what it is that inspires that connection. And for me, I don't go in and think, my primary objective isn't let's go in and see if this has photographic potential. You know, Usually you can get a sense of that straight away anyway. But it's really, how do I feel when I walk into this place? Because if I walk in and there's obviously some photographs there, but I just feel as if it's lacking something, because, you could go to, there's lots of woodlands which are famous, full of wonderful trees, lots of photographic opportunities. But if I go in and there's lots of people around, and, there's people walking dogs, there's other photographers, there's all sorts of activity happening, I'm not interested. Not interested in the slightest. I'll just walk. Even if I can get great photographs there, I don't care,
I'm the
because
same.
yeah, it's just not the environment that, it's just part of being in the woods is that it can feel as it like a completely different realm. It's like you get the border of the woodland, and that's the threshold. You're stepping from one environment into another, and everything changes. Life is different. Wildlife is different. Like I was saying before, everything smells different. And to fully appreciate that, um, I need solitude, because otherwise, just things become a distraction. The only things that I want to hear is the babble of the stream, and, the birds singing, and that kind of thing. That's all part of the immersive experience. I I spent about 6 months of last year feeling quite unwell, and I had to go for, some tests and things, and I'd gone for a test at the hospital, felt absolutely awful afterwards. But then 2 days after that, I thought, right, I can't possibly sit around at home just waiting to feel better. So the first thing that I did was, right, I need to find somewhere new. I need that kind of rush of finding a new woodland. So put my hiking boots on, camera over my shoulder, traveling very light, went for a hike, went to a woodland which I actually visited years ago, and never really got to explore it properly because it was too overgrown. And I was out walking with Adele, so it wasn't an ideal opportunity to dig a bit deeper. And I said to myself at the time, I
Adele
need to go.
is sorry.
Sorry, my partner Adele.
Adele.
Yeah. And I promised myself that I would go back, and I never did. But this seemed like the ideal opportunity years later to revisit. And I walked in, and I was just blown away. Um, it was a tiny location, brimming with potential. But I think it was just one of those other moments. It just hit me because I was feeling bad physically, and I went in. I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that I haven't come back here all these years." But then also that doesn't matter because I'm here now, and I saw so much potential there. I was just sort of overcome with emotion again. I almost cried because like, this is brilliant. It's tiny. Oh, look, there's a deer wandering through, and oh, we've got all these wonderful oak trees, and everything's gnarly, and it's just that feeling of discovery. It's something else, and and it plays into that sense of, it kind of inspires a sense of childlike imagination. When everything's new, if you're a toddler introduced to the world, everything's fascinating. You look at things without prejudice. One mundane thing is just as exciting as, something else. And if you introduce a kid to nature for the very first time, and, you show them a worm, then everything's fantastic. It's like, oh my God, what's that thing wriggling around? And it's kind of like that and that's the view that I think that really helps with woodland photography, is looking at things without prejudice. And this is the issue with social media, is that you're bombarded with images which have a particular style, have a particular species of tree, are representative of, a particular place in, your country. so people end up going looking for that with this kind of blinkered view of what woodland photography is. Whereas I think I benefit from going and say, well, no, that little thing there is just as important as that big fancy tree there. Everything has a part to play. So you've kind of got to shine a light on everything. And then the difficult thing is then bringing all those elements together in something which, makes a nice composition. But that's where the kind of fun part is, I guess.
Yeah, I love the way most of that you didn't even talk about photography. It was more about discovery, the experience, which
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
people don't talk about that enough. A lot of people are too focused on their gear, right, and the settings and the which is obviously important, but really, I think to step up to the next level and to actually, what this is all about is really a form of self-expression and self-fulfillment. Is
yeah,
getting that just a selfish kind of buzz from it, right? Finding
yeah.
how to get that buzz. And most of the time, it doesn't come from setting your ISO or having a specific aperture speed or having a specific lens, right?
Hmm.
It comes from the experience and finding out these, really noticing and observing those small details and then figuring out ways to piece them together. So yeah, I love all that.
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate. When you look back and what felt like an unfortunate set of circumstances and didn't feel good at the time, actually did me the world of good because I
Yeah,
already
tell
knew.
me a little bit more about that, especially in the mental health side.
Hmm,
Because they're so related. The physical and the mindful, so interconnected with each other. I'm sure when you had such a chronic illness and chronic condition that you
hmm.
can't help but spiral into some kind of negative mood and whatever went on, which maybe you will or won't tell us about. But I'm interested to know more a little bit more about that if possible, but and then how if that's connected with a form of escapism almost in kind of leaving home, getting out into the most solitary experience possible in terms of nature and people, no people around, and having that complete, almost pure solitude. They're related to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's. I remember before we got Meg, and I was out just doing my usual, walk for 15 minutes around the streets, um, and it was. I remember going out. It was dark one night, and I would just mope around, and with my knees really hurting and my back hurting, and I remember looking down this dark path which wasn't lit. And it's just one of those things, like it was really weird. I don't think I've ever told this story because it just seems like a really sort of strange thing. But I just looked down this dark path and it's logically you just wouldn't walk down because it just doesn't feel safe. It's like,
Mm,
why would you walk down this dark path? You don't know what's down there. And I never would walk down a dark path like that. But then I was looking, thinking, actually, I don't care what happens. you know, when I go
really?
down here. Yeah, yeah. I think I'm just saying I'm going to go walk down here and I don't care what happens. I know logically nothing's going to happen. Um, but logically you wouldn't normally walk down there either. But, you know, but so in that moment I thought, it seems like a strange thing now, but in the moment I just thought, well, what something's not right there. To have that sort of feeling of,
Yeah.
going down, wanting to walk down this path and not care what happens. I knew that that was a bit strange, and that there was probably more going on in my head than I
Mm,
realized. So yeah, it was. It's very difficult to articulate because when you go into the woods, and you've discovered something which makes you feel fantastic, well, not fantastic, but helps you process, those more negative thoughts, and it just hushes them a little bit. They're not at the
yeah.
forefront anymore, and they just become a little bit more settled. And then the more you expose yourself to those positive environments and positive feelings, then those negative things just get sort of pushed further down, but not pushed and buried. They're just kind of dispersed and they
Yeah.
slowly just fade away over years. Um, and recognizing that is just it's done me wonders creatively because, like we've just been talking about, it meant that the primary focus for me, yes, it was to make photographs as well, but it was just about trying to get myself sorted out mentally and physically. And and I think when you recognize that nature has such a profound power to heal you in that way, the objective of the photography wasn't to, you know, gain a huge following and financial success. The objective of the photography was to celebrate something, was to say, look, I have to do this justice. If something's helped me in such a way, then I have to share with the world my view of it. But I am a perfectionist. That's just who I am. Some people hate me for it, but I'll never apologize for it because it's done me a lot of good. Being meticulous with things. So it became a mission, to like do this justice. I have to present Woodland in a way which isn't just about the kind of more conventionally pretty. And I think it's kind of where I'm moving more these days as well, is like, it started out as here's a wonderful tree, or here's a dead, gnarly, struggling tree, because that's how I felt at the time. And then it evolved into more, positive interpretations of woodland and trees. And now it's more about, the woodland is about so much more than interest in trees. And I think, that's what I want to sort of speak for, really. And again, it's doing justice to everything that makes a woodland special, which is more than single trees. It's about community. It's about the health of the woodland. It's about, falling, decomposing trees as being a positive thing, as part of the life cycle of a healthy woodland. It's not photographers seem to love decay. But I used to see that as a negative thing, whereas now it's like, no, that's an important part of a woodland's life cycle. So it's just the small interpretations and the small nuances and shifts in my own view of the things are very difficult to see in the photographs, but they're there. And so long as it kind of gives you structure and a way to proceed, with projects and your work in general, then it can only be a good thing.
Absolutely. And finding those allegories, I guess, and metaphors amongst the woodland that are subtle and nuanced and that may be only seen by yourself. It doesn't really matter. We're constantly as a human race, we're trying to strive for validation, right? And that means trying to get someone else to see what we see. I need to convince you of what I see, and so on and so forth. There is a lot of equanimity to be found in just settling with, this is just what I see and this is what I feel, and I'm okay with that, and I'm present and happy and peaceful within that. That own self-expression, right?
Yeah, and sort of touching on, which I probably didn't answer very well because I go off on a tangent, but you were talking about escapism as well, and sort of seeking that pure solitude, and that was part of the problem and it's the issue with chronic pain as well, is that it's invisible. Nobody else can see it. If it looks to everybody else that I'm just able to walk and I'm able to get out with the camera, then it must be fine. But that's the problem, is that you do look fine, apart from when you get your back goes into spasm. But other than that's when you get all the sympathy. Then when you can't walk properly, where it's the rest of the time when you're in this state of pain, but nobody else can see it. And that's the worst thing about that, was that you end up becoming quite insular, certainly in the early days. And you think, oh, well, nobody understands it. So you end up removing yourself from social situations, and you don't want to be around people anymore, because you shouldn't expect them to understand it. But I didn't even understand it at the time. So that's why I ended up spending so much time on my own. But I was kind of content with that. I wanted to be on my own in the woods, just me and Meg. And it was escapism. But I think the thing is that I felt as if I needed to process how I was feeling and find a way, feel as if I was making progress, because I thought, I'm no good to be around people anyway right now. I don't
Hmm.
feel as if I'm good company. So when if I get myself into a better place, then I'll start to socialize again. But as far as solitude in the woods is concerned, that's remained a constant. It doesn't matter how happy or content I am or how much I'm seeing friends. I always want to be in the woods on my own. And sometimes I do go and enjoy photography with friends. But what tends to happen is as soon as we walk into the woods, like, bye, see you in a few
Yeah.
hours. Yeah, you know, it's kind
Join
of,
up at the pub later. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. But until then, leave me alone.
And isn't nature a wonderful drug for that, or maybe not drug, a wonderful, cure for that, or at least what am I trying to say? Um, a wonderful, yeah, I guess drug to to help with almost that need and that want to kind of reconnect with something, right? To get me, I was going to say find yourself, but that's, too cheesy and cliche, but just to go and process, right? We're so, and we talked about this off air, but there's so much just everywhere and everything. We don't know how to be bored anymore. We don't know how to be at one with nature anymore. We're not only decimating nature, we just don't know how to, we don't really care to connect with it anymore. We're just so distracted in a world of abundance. It's often those detractions from normal daily life that can really help us see that perspective, gain a wider perspective, but also appreciate the world around us. Is that kind of zest for nature something that you think about and kind of try and pursue the education side of it in terms of, okay, photography is one thing, but hey guys, we need to be appreciating nature more. Do you not see it
Yeah,
like that?
yeah, 100%. And it's why whenever possible, because I'm not an expert, but whenever I can, I try to impart some knowledge through my videos about trees, about woodland, about, you know, this particular, this is what this particular lichen is, and this is why it's important. This is what this algae is called, or this fern looks like this because of this, blah, blah, blah. Or, I'm photographing an ancient oak tree, but what is an ancient oak tree? How old does it have to be ancient? What signs to look out for? Why is that important? What wildlife benefits from these particular trees? Um, and I think the thing is, it's once you start down that path, it is never ending. And it just, I think that's the thing. It's about respect, and it's about fascination and curiosity. And I've done videos with a couple of different ecologists, and whenever I do that, I just think, wow, you're a fountain of knowledge. I know nothing
Mm,
compared to you. But then they don't see themselves as a fountain of knowledge. They see themselves as knowing very little as well. And it just shows that there's so much life, but not as much life going on as there should be in our woodlands. Um, but it should, every little detail, there's so much going on beneath our feet, the world of mycelium and the way that trees communicate with one another and all the theories that surround that. I found that very inspiring and a kind of source of direction for my own work as well. But then somebody will give me some crazy fact about something that a very niche species that requires all these different cycles of events to be able to exist. And you just think that's crazy. Just think the abundance and complexity of things that surround this one particular tree or this one little area of dirt. And it again, it kind of promotes you to slow down and just spend time with something. And the more you understand something and the more you can appreciate all those different life cycles, you don't no longer look at an oak tree as a subject. And that's the worst thing to do, I think, to look at any tree as merely a photographic subject. These are living documents of time, with so many complex things going around them that if you just spend time, if you've got an old ancient tree with holes in it, stick your head inside, just see what's going on, explore it from different angles, be curious. And curiosity is one of the best tools we can take into nature. Touch things, see how they feel, get an understanding of why the bark is like that. And in that process of fascination and curiosity, the chances are you're going to then set up eyes upon the best possible composition to best represent how special that particular tree or series of trees or scene of trees is. And that's what it's about, really, is saying, this is just a wonderful, beautiful, complex thing. Here is my best possible representation of it. And I hope you can, appreciate this, through my eyes.
Tell us about the business side of photography. We talked about almost the philosophy behind it, and I'm glad you talked a little bit there about how other photographers can kind of learn to have the eyes to notice, the quiet details and the emotional cues that might make up your composition or the allegories behind what you're trying to photograph. So I think that's a really important part, obviously, to slow down, and that just by slowing down will allow you to notice a little bit more, but be curious. Yeah, I think we'll be curious in all forms of life. I think a lot of us have lost that desire to be curious. But that being said, tell me about, I'm curious in how you translate these types of experiences into paying your electric every month and, making a business model out of your photography. So give us I have a kind of a general kind of objective viewpoint from external, the external standpoint, but tell us all the insider knowledge of how you successfully create a sustainable business model around this type of photography.
Yeah, it's not easy, but I don't know, because it's difficult talking about it. It's difficult talking about this because it feels as if you're in a position of privilege in a way, because it's like, well, it's worked for you, that doesn't mean it's going to work for me. But I remember, so my friend Thomas Heaton, who has a huge YouTube channel, I became friends with him back in the early days when he'd only done about 6 videos, something like that. And, we went out and we did some photography together. And he said, oh, he said, people will love to see your work. You should start a YouTube channel. I was like, okay, yeah, I could definitely think about that, because I was at a time where my website development business was failing. We'd not been able to spend time at the desk. And he said, but don't pigeonhole yourself to woodland photography. People want to see a whole variety of things. And then that sort of started to ring alarm bells with me. I thought, no, this woodland photography is what I love. It's what I know. It's where I've got a voice. I can't imagine talking about street photography or whatever or something else, because that would just feel a bit contrived. I've got to go with where my heart is. So that's what I did. And I went to a local woodland. I mean, I practiced to start with. I was going out in the woods, recording myself on the mobile phone, cringing afterwards with how horrendous it was.
Yeah, as we do. Yeah.
Yeah. And but then eventually plucked up the courage, made a video, and at that particular time, it was as best. It was the best it could possibly be at that time for the first video. But it gained traction straight away. I was just fortunate that at the time there wasn't loads of people. There's nowhere near as many people on YouTube now as what there is now talking about photography, because it was like 9 years ago, something like that. And there was nobody else specifically talking about woodland photography. And I was anthropomorphizing trees, and nobody was on YouTube talking about that either. And it just I was just very fortunate that, I mean, to me, it was just like, this is what I do. This is just me in the local woods with my dog, anthropomorphizing trees and getting excited by it. And that's just what it did. It was just recording a typical day, and people loved it. And I remember putting the video out, and then we went on holiday to the Lake District, and it was over Christmas time, I think. I just couldn't believe it. We sat there in a holiday cottage and all these comments were coming through, and I got something like 4,000 subscribers just from that first video.
Wow.
And it's still my most viewed video. I've never had a video like it since. Um, and that it kind of grew from there, but very, very slowly, because people say, right, now you need to do a weekly video. And it's like, I can't do that. I can't, physically, I can't do a weekly video. So I just got, if I had been doing a weekly video for the past 9 years, maybe my YouTube channel would be huge, but something would have suffered in that process. And it probably would have been me and my photography. So I've just kind of found a rhythm now where I put out a video as and when I'm ready to. And I try to make it thoughtful. And, rather than just going through the motions. And then I have my book, and I'm should have a zine coming out soon, and I've done workshops, and that's what's provided the income. And yeah, I make next to no money from YouTube whatsoever. Ad revenue almost non-existent, and because I just don't, I'm not putting out videos every single week and not getting tens of thousands of views every single week. So I don't know. I try to treat it as a hobby, which is ridiculous because, I have to pay the bills. But what I mean is that I don't want to lose the sense of it being a hobby. I don't want to lose that magic of, I'm excited to go out with the camera. I love woodland photography more than I ever have. And that's me being genuine. Whereas I think if I'd been so bogged down in trying to get, hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube, or, to build up my Instagram following, or to make as much money as I possibly could, I don't think that love would be there, because so many people I speak to say, well, it's just a job for me now. I don't love it as much as I used to. And I just think that's a crying shame, because if you want your legacy to be the photography and your love of your subject matter and bodies of work that you stand the test of time and you want to be proud of, then you have to protect the passion for photography, because if you lose that, something's going to be lost in the end results, and people will see it, and certainly people who know what they're looking at will see it as well. And I'd rather protect that than my legacy to be, oh, he was the guy on YouTube with 500,000 followers or whatever,
Yeah,
just,
Sean Tucker.
yeah. Yeah, but he's another one, he puts out, very meaningful, thoughtful work, and isn't pressurizing
Like once a
himself to,
month.
yeah, once a month. And he's fantastic. And he doesn't need to put out lots of videos because each one carries so much weight.
Yeah, and the days are over of that anyway, in terms of making a significant income from social media, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, whatever, might be able to pay for brand deals or an AdSense and all this kind of stuff. You get pocket money from it, and you have to be top of your game, millions of followers to really like make
Yeah.
a significant sustainable income from it. But what it can do, right, is if you use it correctly as a tool, it can be used as, a lead magnet almost, or a marketing tool, in order to, push people towards a product, or a community, or or a podcast, or a digital asset, or your print store, or workshops, right? So, as long as people can see it like that. But if people go into it thinking they're gonna, I'm gonna basically sell out because I want to make money and be a social media star, it's just not going to happen.
No.
So yeah, tell me about. I think I mentioned print stores. I know you love prints as much as I do. Is that still a big integral part of your process? And if so, why?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I love printing because it's that final stage in the process, isn't it? And it requires so much attention to detail as well. And I love that kind of meticulous process of producing a nice print, because it's that end of that process of celebration, isn't it? You've celebrated the woods by making the photograph. It's attracted some attention online, but essentially, when I make a photograph, it's with a view to print. And a lot of photographs that I make now, they just get lost on, where my biggest platform outside of YouTube is Instagram. And sometimes I look at the photograph and just think, do I even want to post it on here? It's too small. No, the chances are nobody's going to really spend any time with it. And why would you spend time with an image that's, 1080 pixels wide? So it's always with a view to print. And there's just something very special about, having something tactile and extremely rewarding if someone chooses to buy that print and put it up on their wall and they're this other side of the world. That's wonderful. And particularly because, these are anonymous images, they're not representative of a location. They're not reminding somebody of their holiday in Scotland or anything like that. It's something very personal and, to be over woodland and trees that those people have never ever seen, but they still want it on the wall. And that's quite precious, really. But also it teaches you a lot as a photographer. It teaches you a lot about texture, about color, about luminosity. And when you make your very first print, you realize just how dark your images were.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, somebody said to me once, says, "Oh, your images look a lot brighter than used to be." It's like, yeah, now they're kind of properly exposed because I'm printing them. But I have a new wall over here, which is a magnetic wall. So I've been doing a bit of an office refurb recently. So now my printer's over there. I can make an image, make a print, and pin it to my magnetic wall nice and easily. So I can sort of move those around.
Cool.
And just live with an image, and just see how we respond to it as the days go by. And if I look at it 6 months from now and I still feel great about it, then I know that's a good print, and that's really one that I should perhaps try and sell or frame it and hang it in our own house. But
that's a really great method that a lot of people, I don't want to be ageist. Well, it's certainly a lot of the younger generation, they photograph for posting, social media, right? That's generally the outlet, me included. I still print, and I still take a lot of pride in website and, sharing media kits, because I can, curate and create photo pairs that you can't really do as well with social media, plus all the other issues with sizes and resolutions and stuff like that. That's a really nice way of thinking about photography, that, I'm going to print something out, and if I still like it, or if I'm still looking at it with curiosity and pride and fulfillment, whatever it might be, after a month, then I know it's something of value, and we just don't do that anymore. So I might even do that myself. I like that approach.
Yeah, which is like people have different approaches to post-processing as well, don't they? Where, I've got a friend who, she doesn't post-process soon after making the photograph, because she wants to detach herself from the experience so she can be entirely objective. I don't buy into that. I want to remember the experience. I want to feel the emotion still, recall the moment when I process the image, because it inspires the direction I take with the processing. I want the feeling of the moment to guide the direction. But after I've done a quick edit, then it gets put away. Then I'll return to it some weeks later and say, right, now objectively, can something be different? And that's really so I'll print the image and sort of still be very aware of the experience and the emotion, but then over time you do become more objective of it, and the vast majority of the time something changes in the print. Be a minor thing, but some people think I'm absolutely bonkers, like, well, I can't tell the difference between those two prints. I was like, oh yeah, that one's like a tiny bit brighter. Like, well, does it matter? Yeah, of course it does. It's
perfectionist.
Yeah.
What's the point of doing it if you're not striving for perfection? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and it's just, it never will be perfect. But I just think the sum of the tiny changes make all the difference, and that's what editing is for me. It's tiny changes which look like nothing, but the sum of those parts make all the difference.
We talked a little bit about your process and the end result being quite important to you. I mean, I guess in an individual basis with each image, we've kind of talked about how you might realize if an image is successful or good enough for you. But generally speaking, over your photography world, do you think about kind of that word success much? And if so, how do you kind of define it?
Yeah, I used to get hung up on wanting to be validated, and wanting to my work to be admired by my peers. So I used to get sort of quite hung up on that. Just like, it's that's down to confidence, so isn't it? I think,
Mm,
I wasn't seeking praise. I just I wanted to know if I was heading in the right direction. And that was an important part of the process, actually, was getting to the point where I actually had confidence in what I was doing, because I felt as if there was something there. I felt as if I was making nice images, but I didn't know why or how or what good composition was. And I think it was in 2016, I had a bit of a moment where I suddenly became more confident in the images that I was producing. And then and then over time, what other people think of them has become less and less important. But of course, you want to get to a point where you feel as if other people like what you're doing, because part of what we're doing as well is sharing. But if what you're sharing nobody likes, it sort of feels like a bit of a sort of futile endeavor. But
mm,
um, yeah, I think with now, there's some people won't necessarily like the direction that I take with some of my images. Um, but it's confidence that allows me to be, to care about that a little bit less. Because if I feel as if it's representing something that's important to me and that I think has value moving forward, and when it's because I take some images now as standalone images, they're not going to get any real attention if I post them on Instagram. Um, but having done some publications now and seeing the benefit of, curating images and presenting them as a body of work, that's what I'm more conscious about now.
mm,
Is okay, you might not have liked that image on its own, but here's a zine or here's a book or here's a box set. Now I feel as if it makes sense, and that's kind of what I aim for. And then hopefully as a collection, as a cohesive collection, that's what people kind of
yeah,
enjoy.
absolutely. And you talk about people, what people enjoy in getting your work out there. And we've talked a lot about the opposite of kind of shying away from people and being solitary, but you've kind of combined all of this into the 617 Club
Oh
and a
yeah.
community. Tell us about that. Tell us about the communal side of Simon.
Yeah. The begrudgingly communal side of it. No, it's not. Um no, that's a bit it's been entirely positive actually. And it's good for me because um essentially, as much as I like solitude and I need that from a photography, people are extremely important in the process as well. And now I put a lot more value into that than I used to. Because I think when I started to realize that actually was in 2022, when I started to feel significantly better physically. And I did an exhibition with Joe Cornish called Woodland Sanctuary. So I worked very, very closely with Joe to produce this exhibition, and it was just a wonderful experience to kind of share, the love of nature with somebody else, and to just have those conversations and have a sounding board and bounce ideas off somebody else. And then the end result was much better than if it had just been either one of us on our own. So
Mm,
that was kind of really the thing that made me realize that actually sometimes working with people is extremely valuable, and the whole thing of collaboration on a creative project. But then Tom and I have been looking for probably the past 3 years or more doing some sort of venture together. We wanted to do something which was, yes, it was a business decision. It was something that we wanted to earn money from, but in a way that took some pressure off, so that it didn't mean that it was a way of earning money, but in a way that would still allow us to go out and pursue photography in a way that we'd like to. And that's what the community is about, really. It's about creating a safe space for everybody else. So, there's the benefits of social media, but none of the pitfalls, so we don't have trolls, and we don't have algorithms and all the stuff that gets in the way. It's a smaller number of people, but it's a good close-knit group so that people can feel safe and they can engage better with posts. It's not just a case of scrolling through and double tapping. It's reading, it's replying, it's starting a conversation. Um, and for that, it's great. And we do like a live stream every single week as well. Actually, we've got 2 a week now. So that's a great opportunity to engage with the community as well. And they can type comments as we're talking. And, we have a bit of a laugh with it, and photo challenges and just stuff that gets people involved, but also meetups so that people can, meet people in person. And a lot of people, are very different to me, and they're striving, they're really seeking that personal connection with people. They like photography, but they would prefer to be doing it with somebody else. So we're trying to create a platform where it gives them, the vehicle, and we try and sort of spearhead this as well to get people to have their own meetups, which they can organize through the 617 Club, and then we have the official ones where we can all get together. But it's about creating sort of real friends as well. Um, and I do genuinely love the meetups and meeting people, and it's very exciting, and it's a bit of an adrenaline rush. But then afterwards, it's like, okay, that was fantastic, but I want to be on my own again now. you know, I kind of I re-energize by being out in the woods, and that kind of gets me back onto an even keel. Um, but I do love those kind of communal meetups as a short burst. It's like visiting the capital city. It's like, oh wow, this is all very fascinating and novel. But after 2 days, like, right, that was good, but get me out now.
Enough. Yeah. I was going to say it's like seeing your parents. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's that as
Enough.
well.
One day's enough. Yeah.
Yeah,
So how do we'll obviously link this in, link your 617 Club as well as your own website and YouTube channel, etc. in the description. People can just head to the 617 Club and investigate and sign up there.
yeah. So the website's the 617.club, which gives more information. And then my website is baxter.photos. Where I've got
Cool.
my book is called Gathering Town.
Great. We'll encourage people to head over to all those platforms, check them out, throw some money away, keep supporting the solitary adventures into the woods.
Yeah. Well, if you want, I can I'll give you a like 10% discount code off my book if that's
Great.
of
Yep. We'll
interest
throw
to
that in
people.
there. Absolutely. That'd be awesome. Thank you very much. We'll leave with one question, and going back to the woods, I want to hear about something relative to your relationship with the natural world that maybe you've never said publicly, but because maybe it feels a bit too vulnerable or strange. And I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but is there anything that you can think of that you think the audience might be interested to hear about?
If there's moments where you do feel vulnerable and you feel scared, and you feel as if, the pressure's a bit too much, or I know I've had, I've moments where, I've lost a friend through suicide, um, and then difficulties with families and that kind of thing. And I don't know, there's just something, even just the process of actually driving to the woods, and playing the right music in the car, it just puts you emotionally in a different place. And I can get emotional just sort of visualizing what's about to happen, as I'm driving there. And when I think just of the profound effect that time with trees has had, and it sounds weird to say it was not weird at all, but it sounds weird because you think of the person that you once were, where you would just think that somebody talking about trees in this way is like a bit la-di-da. But having now experienced it and lived it, and been altered in such a positive way by nature, then you can't sing its praises enough. And you know, you have to share that. And in that process, you have to be vulnerable because, you know, if you've been moved in such a way where you can stand in the woods and, you know, sob, then, you know, that's quite a powerful thing to, you know, change you, you know, fundamentally as a person, where that can actually happen when you used to think that that would never happen. So I think that's the thing, is that, you know, as any person, whether you think you're strong and you can't be affected that way, you know, if you're struggling, if you're stressed, if you've got difficulties, then I think you can find solace in nature. And I just hope that, and it's always been part of sharing, you know, the whole process of sharing and being vulnerable. And I have talked about, you know, difficult things on YouTube in passing as well. And the real hope is that if that can encourage just at least one person to go out and experience that and benefit from that in a very profound way, then that's job done, isn't it? And that's why it's so important to talk about everything beyond the photograph, and everything that's wrapped up in the process and the experience of nature. And yeah, that's it really.
I love it. What a great answer. And thank you for being open and articulate with kind of your thoughts behind how that process, how photography, how that environment and that interaction with nature has essentially saved you, right? And so, you know, I'm sure actually that even people listening to this, as well as the thousands that watch your YouTube videos, feel just as inspired as I have, and feel just as hopeful maybe to find something that works like that for them, whatever
hopefully.
mental or physical state they might be in the time. So thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing. Incredible work. And we'll be watching from over here, and hopefully I get to meet you in the woods maybe one day. That sounds weird. Maybe I won't meet you.
Not randomly by accident.
Not randomly.
That would be weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much,
Thank you very
Simon.
much for Matt. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Simon Baxter, welcome to the Mood Podcast. Fuck me, why can't I do that properly?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And then with camera's
just perfect
strange.
timing with your camera.
What's going on with you? There we go. It's back.
Okay.
I think it lost my face.
We might just let her bark it out.
Yeah, she'll stop now. It's because something's come through the front door. She's normally such a quiet dog.
Let's let her get the package before we continue.
Shall I go
not if you think she'll... It's up to you. If you think she'll quiet down. Right, quiet.
Oops, camera's lost me. This way. Come on, this way.
What is that? That's like
right.
One of
There we are.
Yeah, okay, cool. Cool, bless her.